welcome Mantha sir.
Yeah,
I would
hello,
like to
hello.
request,
Yeah,
welcome sir. I would like to request my team to kindly share the introduction of Dr. S Mantha ji. Dr. S Mantha, former chairman AICTE, CEO MSKC Mahapreet, adjunct professor NIS Bangalore, emeritus professor VJTI for AI and robotics. In an illustrious career that spans more than 40 years, Dr. S Mantha has held several important positions both in academics and public administration. Dr. S Mantha was former chairman of the national regulator AICTE and implemented several e-governance initiatives and facilitating regulations over a 6-year stint. Earlier, a professor of robotics, control theory, and AI at VJTI, he now occupies the emeritus chair. His work at IBM Poughkeepsie, New York on Tivoli is also noteworthy. He has more than 280 publications in national and international journals and conferences, besides authoring 3 books. He is the author of NVEQF, now renamed the National Skill Qualification Framework, NSQF, and the Regulations for Blended Learning. He was member Karnataka Skill Development Authority and advisor to Government of Andhra Pradesh. He was the Pro-Vice Chancellor of SNDT, Women's University, and the Chancellor, Kale University, both of which he served for 3 years. Currently, he is the CEO of Mahapreet Startup Knowledge Center. He is also an adjunct professor at the National Institute for Advanced Studies, Bangalore, and chairman of Technical Committee, National Cyber Safety and Security Standards, and IT expert for the Government of Maharashtra. Amongst numerous and various famous newspaper articles that he has authored, some are right here in front of you. Atithi Devo Bhava, Atmanirbharta for a New India, Digital Push, Human Aspect Vital, Dream and Aspire, Chat GPT is work in progress, universities must innovate and adapt, AI, useful servant, dangerous master, time to reconnect ourselves, education should teach life, how Indian universities can break into global top 100, why university rankings are in trouble from India to US, keep your skills relevant, and many more. Thank you so much, Dr. Mantha, for joining us today as our chief guest. I request you, sir, to kindly please address the gathering.
thank you, Dr. Pallavi, for the kind introduction. Dr. Vivek Kushwaha for inviting me to the show. First of all, good morning to all the participants and the invited guests. And it's an honor to be here to be addressing actually, I've been in the mail, I have been given the choice of choosing my subject. So, but I believe this is a program on research and, the research in the institution, in the outside the institution and so on. But then we keep hearing so much of research and, that the country spends about 0.6% of its GDP, whereas countries like, UK, China, US, China, which are almost 10 times the Indian GDP, spend almost 3% of their, GDP on research. But then the problem is you need to create a lot of research facilities. You need to spend a lot of money in order to create research that's worthwhile in terms of making a mark in the world, in the context of what the world is doing, and so on. So these things probably will be spoken to you during the course of the day and the course of the program, but I will not be talking much on that aspect. Since I have been given the choice of selecting my own topic for the day, I will speak to you something on the value system that we lack in our education system, in our universities, and because of which there is a deficit of happiness, and therefore there are a lot of other things that follow amongst our students, amongst our faculty, and so on. So all that is connected to education in some way, and I will try and articulate my thoughts for the day. So I'll share my screen probably that is required for me. I have a small presentation. So let me share this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'll do is my context will be, happiness and courage to serve and values that our universities struggle to teach us. So in that process, what I'll do is go through a few aspects of higher education in the universities and what it means to us in the current context. So I'll start off with a few concepts of what education is. Like our universities are, for deductive learning, and the experiential part of the learning comes from, from the hands-on working. So the deductive part of the learning, the analysis, the rationalizing, the thought, the new knowledge part of it, the thought process, those are the things which come within the university. And that is how the universities were set up in the early days for deductive learning. Whereas the hands-on learning was all experiential and actually on the job. But today that paradigm seems to have been reversed in the sense that we take pride in saying that our institution has 100% placement. And therefore that seems to be driving the university education. The ability to place students in meaningful jobs seems to be the most important aspect of education today. Though the early universities, not the ancient, the early universities were never set up and meant for providing jobs. They were meant for, giving skills that can be useful to find a job, to find a meaningful job in any of the places that eventually the students would go. But in that process, what we have conveniently forgotten are our values, which lead to unhappiness and therefore a deficit of self-consciousness and things like that. And therefore we end up, finding ways and means of improving that happiness quotient in everything that we do. So my presentation will have something on what is happiness context, is it contextual? Then how does the world look at it? And what is Atmanirbharta? Then, education actually plays a big role in that value system in providing higher education and so on. And therefore, we must understand what values must the universities teach us, and how does Adi Shankaracharya look at or he looked at in his times, the paradigm of education, and so on. So what is compassion towards fellow beings? And somehow our universities have also failed in providing the best leadership experience. So therefore, how the role of a leader vis-a-vis the university system, these are some of the issues that I'll try and do today. So having said that, for me, happiness is a state of mind. Now, is it contextual is something that we really need to understand. And can there be happiness without pain, without tragedy? So there is something called as sthita prajna. And sthita means existing and prajna means wise. So wisdom is something that makes a big difference in terms of finding happiness. Existing with wisdom is what is important, and which is sthita prajna, which means everything around us, we should not be affected by it and do our job with a single-minded purpose. So sthita prajna will become a person who is enlightened, who understands the situation around him, whether it's bad, whether it's good, from his well-being perspective and whether that affects him. The person for whom the surrounding doesn't affect will be truly happy. And for that to happen, there are many values that have to be realized. And those values come from the family, those values come from the university system, it comes from the peers, and so on. And most important of that is compassion. So let's see. We go ahead a little. Then, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, how does one become sthita prajna? How does one have steady mind? And in order to assimilate something within the university system, if I'm sitting in a classroom and if I have to understand what is happening within the classroom, I have to concentrate. And for that, the surrounding should not disturb me and I should not disturb the surroundings. So how does one have a steady mind? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisya keshava. Sthitadhi kim prabhashet kimasit vrajeta kim. Now, this is how does one have steady mind? Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisya keshava. Keshava, how do I have a steady mind? And Krishna replies that sthita prajna is one who is not affected by anything. So therefore, context also becomes redundant. Now, going a little further, how does science and our, consciousness work together? For example, most of you know that there is natural frequency, and every body has a natural frequency. A human body also has natural frequency, and it is defined by root K by M. K is stiffness and M is mass. So it's the ratio of stiffness to mass. And there is something called as forced frequency, which comes on us depending on what the surrounding is, what the context is. Suppose we are highly stressed, then the forced frequency comes out of stress. Then if we are, doing something and stressed because there is something else happening in our life, then the context of, it changes. So therefore, forced frequency is something that comes on us because of external conditions. And natural frequency is something that is due to our body composition, our body mass, and so on. So natural frequency is ratio of stiffness to mass. So which means if I have to increase the natural frequency, I should reduce my mass and I should increase my stiffness. I should become more tougher. And therefore, again, education plays an important part in that. And when these two become same, your natural frequency and your forced frequency become same, then resonance occurs. And in that state, the amplitudes become infinite and there is a possibility of someone failing. So therefore, your mental ability should increase as a function of what you do in life and how the stress happens on your life. Which means in order to not to reach a resonance condition and eventually fail, I'll have to improve my stiffness, reduce my body mass index, increase my natural frequency, and things like that. So all this happens because, and once you cross the state of the first harmonics, you get into the second harmonics without failure, and you get into the third, fourth, and so on. Somewhere along the line, when you reach higher harmonics, you become one with the cosmos. That is the time when sthita prajna happens. Nothing around you affects you, and so on. So our entire university training, our education system must move people to accept what is around us with equanimity. Then, in terms of the world, understanding of the world and happiness, there is something called as dystopia and utopia. Now, dystopia is an imagined state of society in which there is great suffering or injustice. And your utopian world is something where, the community or the society is perfectly ideal. And our world lies somewhere in between a dystopian and an utopian world. And we really need to understand how this affects our systems, our well-being, our education, our values, our understanding, and things like that. Actually, Brave New World is a dystopian social science fiction novel by Aldous Huxley, and 1984 is a novel which by George Orwell, which is actually utopian, understanding. So it's actually very interesting to read them and understand the context between a dystopian way of life and an utopian way of life. So how does the education part work for us? The understanding from Upanishads tells us, Ano Badra Krutavo Yantu Vishwataha Adabdaso Aparitas Udvidaha Devano Yatha Sadmit Vruddhe Asannaprayate Rakshitaro Dive Dive. Now, Ano Badra, let noble thoughts come to us from all sides, Vishwata, from the entire world, Adabdaso Aparitasa Udvidaha, which means it should not be bound by anything. It should transcend every boundary that we have. And therefore, once we follow this, Devano Yatha Satmit Vrude Asanna Prayaru Rakshitaro Deve Deve, means we, every day, the education that we have, the knowledge that we have should increase by leaps and bounds. And that's how we attain a state where we become self-reliant. And that self-reliance is also called as Atmanirbharta. Now, if we go a little more into Atmanirbharta, what it really means is Sarvam Paravasham Dukkham, Sarvam Atmavasham Sukham. Sarvam Paravasham Dukkham is anything that is in control of the others will get me pain, and anything that is in my control will bring me happiness. So that is how it operates, and our education system should give us enough, material, enough confidence to become Atmanirbhar. So here I have, there are actually two forms of education. One is Aparavidya and the other is Paravidya. Now, Aparavidya is something that we get in our universities. It is bound by limits. In our university, we can only learn so much and nothing beyond that. Whereas Paravidya it goes beyond the university system, and the whole life we need to do that learning, which is called as Paravidya. So in the ancient days, we should revisit the pedagogies and the andragogies that Shankaracharya used to use. And so for both education for the youth and education for adults. And one is pedagogy, and for the adults, it's andragogy. Now, therefore, Shankaracharya uses Shravana Vidhi, which means listen attentively. Manana Vidhi, having learned, you understand through your, meditation. Nidhi Dhyasa Vidhi, you should reach conclusions having understood something. Prashnottara Vidhi is a question-answer session where you understand many more things. Tarka Vidhi is something where you reason out, remove doubts, and so on. Vyakhya Vidhi is exposition. You do tika, means you criticize and you remove the doubts. Vyakhya Vidhi, then Adhyaropa Apavada Vidhi is a projection method. Then you have Drishtanta Vidhi, you have Katha Katana Vidhi, you have Upadesha Vidhi. Upadesha Vidhi is where I speak, I give Upadesh, and you listen, and that is how we learn. Now, these are all the pedagogies and andragogies that Shankaracharya used in his time, and they're extremely useful and meaningful at this point of time when we need to understand what is education, how it is evolving, and things like that. So in the modern times, as we have seen what was happening in the ancient times, now we are seeing what is happening in the modern times. We have authority style, we have delegator style, we have facilitator style, we have demonstrator style, we have hybrid style. These are all a little similar to what some of the methods that Shankaracharya used to use, but these have more technology built into them. Now, Adi Shankaracharya's teaching learning methods, they are completely student-centric. They happen even today in many of the, in the mutts that they have created. You know, Shringeri Sharda Peetham formed on the ethos of Yajurveda. Dwarka Peetham was formed on Samaveda. Jyotirmatha Peetham was formed on Atharva Veda. Govardhana Matha was formed on Rigveda. And they all use all the pedagogies that I've spoken about in their matas to teach. Some of those things will have to come back to our university system in order to make much more meaningfully, given education and impart of knowledge. Now, if what is unfortunate is about our university system today is that we have chosen to discard all those pedagogies except two. So what are those two? Shravana Vidhi and Upadesha Vidhi. The teacher comes to the classroom, he teaches and student listens. And it's like Upadesha Vidhi. Teacher is giving a sermon, student listens and goes out. Then nothing, hardly anything happens besides this. Therefore, is it time to reinvent? Now, reinvent our university systems. For this to happen, values are extremely important. And unless we get into value education in our universities, the real impart of education, real impart of knowledge doesn't happen. So, what values are we supposed to do? Shatashu jayate shura, sahasreshu cha pandita, Bhakta dasha sahasreshu data bhavati va nava. Among 100 is born one valorous. Shateshu jayate shura. Among 1,000 is born an intelligent being. Sahasreshu cha pandita. An orator being in 10,000. Bhakta dasha sahasreshu. Data bhavati va nava. A true giver may never be born. So our universities must start with this spirit in the education. Then, like I said, our universities are for deductive learning. They are to teach you how to analyze, how to think, how to, be creative, innovative, and things like that. Not to get you a job. Getting a job is incidental. So the importance of education must be understood within our university system. Na choraharyam, na charajaharyam, na bhatrubhajyam, na cha bharakari, vyayankurte vardhate eva nityam vidyadanam sarvadhana pradhanam. It cannot be snatched away by a thief. Na choraharyam cannot be snatched away by a king. Na rajaharyam cannot be divided by among brothers. Na bhatrubhajyam. And it's not heavy either. Na cha bharakari. If spent daily, it only grows. So this is the spirit from which we should originate. As far as the modern universities are concerned, they're completely digitally transformed. In future, at least, many of the universities are moving towards this concept. Everything is AI enabled, whether it's a canteen assistant, whether it's student life, whether it's marketing, digital marketing, and so on. Everything is student-centric. The national education policy talks about student-centric education. And therefore, all our systems must be student-centric. But in order to do all this, it needs a lot of money. And to build a university that is completely digitally enabled, it needs money and it needs a lot of understanding of the basic principles of education. So whether we find that money from somewhere, whether in order to do research, meaningful research, you need money. Somebody has to fund the research and there will be new knowledge created. That knowledge will bring in more new knowledge and things like that. It brings you new products and so on. But at the end of the day, the university system must inculcate values. Now, what kind of values? Paropakaraya phalanti vruksha, paropakaraya vahanti nadya, paropakaraya karaya duhyanti gava, paropakarartham idam shariram. Now, which means the research shows that paropakaraya phalanti vruksha, the trees give you trees, the trees give you fruits, because that is what they are meant for. And similar things, the paropakaraya vahanti, the rivers flow to help others. Paropakaraya duhyanti gava, the cow gives milk to help others. And paropakarartham idam shariram, our life is also for good of others. These are some of the basic understanding that we must have in our university education system. The second value is be humble. Namanti falino vriksha, namanti gunino jana, shushka vrikshascha murkascha na namanti kadachana. Namanti falino vriksha, trees laden with fruits, bend downward, just as namanti gunino jana, just as the intelligent, the one who has understood himself, bows down to respect others. Shushka vrikshascha murkascha. Murka means one who is a stupid fellow. He will lie like a log, similar to shushka vruksha, means a dry log. So that is what happens in a university system. We should not be lazy. We should not, if we are lazy, we lose out. Alasasya kuto vidya, avidyasya kuto dhanam, adhanyasya kuto mitram, amitrasya kutah sukham. One who is lazy and doesn't put in efforts will not acquire knowledge. Alasasya kuto vidya. Wealth does not come to one without knowledge. Avidyasya kuto dhanam. In such bad times, one cannot make good friends. Adhanasya kuto mitram, amitrasya kuto sukham. And without good friends, you will not get good happiness. So there are many ways of explaining what we should do and what we should not do and things like that. Then there are other value system values. We should help others. Ashtadasa Puraneshu Vyasasya Vachanadvayam Paropakara Punyaya Papaya Parapidanam. This is again the essence of 18 Puranas of sage Vyasa. It says to help others is a good merit and to trouble others is a sin. These are simple things in life, but they must come out of our education system. Whether it happens at the school system or whether it happens at the university system, it makes a difference. And normally, all this must happen within the school system, and that is where we have completely forgotten. And within the university system, the less said, the better. We only concentrate on the work values that we would probably require to get a job, and that's where we also end. So there is an essence of giving. Shatahasta samahara sahasra sankira, earn with 100 hands and donate with 1,000 hands. So these are some things that will help us in leading a good life. The sun looks red while rising and setting, and great men too remain alike in both good and bad times. Something that we must learn. Then paropakarartham idam buddhi brahmajnanartham jivanam. This intellect is for helping others, and this life is for gaining supreme knowledge. So every time we go to a university, it is not the self that is important, but it is the welfare of the others that should be important. Now, Sant Kabir Das also said, education must teach us, Bura jo dekhan main chala, bura na mileya koi. Jo dil khoja apna, mujhse bura na koi. Realization of this truth is the end of the ego. Our university system, our education system must teach this. And to control ego, you need to control the mind, which means be objective, rational, but compassionate. Whatever that be, universities cost money for all its services. Therefore, should universities become business houses? Should future universities be run like business houses to please customers and to provide service to students? In the ultimate analysis, whether it's a public or a private university, it's not a business. Universities are for learning and research that do not have customers in a traditional sense. They do not. Students are not their customers. They have multiple stakeholders, including students, faculty, administrators, parents, public, who support the institution by paying taxes, by providing labor and paying tuition. But at no time, students should be treated as a customer. But unfortunately, today, we have institutions for profit. People are already talking about universities for profit. So in business, in the US, you have a separate class of institutions which are set up for profit. In business, the bottom line is measured in profits. At a university, the bottom line is measured in the extent to which we promote the common good through research and teaching. However, most administrative tasks necessary to keep the institution operating are privatized. They need money. Once you outsource a canteen within a university, you need those resources and money and things like that. So if we are outsourcing every single activity, the digital university concept is a completely outsourced concept. You get in a traditional university, you have an academic function, you have an administrative function. Now, if I digitize through several applications the administrative functions, and through several applications the academic functions, and port in third-party content like from Coursera or edX or whatever, then I am actually outsourcing the entire university work. Now, when I do that, how do I become Atmanirbhar then? Values are important, and what values and who will teach them? That is much more important for me. So Atmanirbharta comes out of effective leadership. So universities also must provide, good leaders. And are our universities producing any good leaders today? So these are some of the questions that we have. Now, what is good leadership? Jivesha Karunach api maitri teshu vidhiyatam. Be compassionate and friendly to all living beings. We talk of equity in university education. What is equity? This is equity. Be compassionate and friendly to all living beings. Nishchitatva prakramate na antarvasati karmana avandhyakalo vishyatma savai pandita uchyate. Now, whose endeavors are preceded by a firm commitment, who does not take long rest before tasks are completed, who does not waste time, and who has control over his mind, is a good employee. Our teachers must follow this. Now, that is when they will be able to identify with the main principle of education and knowledge. Then we all know Colin Powell, who led the US Army. He said the day soldiers stop bringing their problems to the leader is the day when you have stopped leading them. So therefore, our teaching community must encourage students to come and ask questions, must lead the way, and that is how the interaction between students and teachers grows. The day students stop coming to teachers, that is the end of the teaching process, and that is the end of a teacher. So the day students stop getting their problems to teachers, that is when the teaching as a process has stopped. So therefore, one should encourage students to come to them, seek questions, seek answers, and so on. So in that process, a leader must be willing to be challenged by the students. And therefore, we understand that sometimes there are questions, but the teachers are unable to answer and things like that. But then that's a process, and the teachers should encourage the students to ask questions, however difficult they are. And if they are unable to answer at a certain time, they should probably tell them, we'll go back, read that again, come back, analyze it, and things like that. So that's what must happen. Now, in order that all this happens, mindfulness is extremely important. Keeping in touch with the present moment, our understanding of what is going on deepens, and we begin to be filled with acceptance, joy, peace, and love. So then the connect between the teacher and the student grows, and that is how the learning happens. So what is mind control then? Elevate yourself through the power of your mind and not degrade yourself, for the mind can be the friend and also the enemy of the self. So at the back end, I must practice these virtues of life, and at the front end in a classroom, I can practice them. Uddhared atmanam, atmanam na atmanam vyasadayet, atmaivahi atmano bandhuratmaiva ripuratmana. So elevate yourself through the power of your mind. Uddhared atmana atmanam. And not degrade yourself. Atmanam vyasadayet. Mind, for the mind can be the friend. Atmavai atmano, bandhuratmaiva. Otherwise, it becomes an enemy. That is ripuratmana. So we should understand that there is, there is an emotional connect, there's a physical connect, there's a spiritual connect, environmental, social, occupational, intellectual. All this put together gives us the happiness quotient. And all these are virtues that are brought in within the university. So these are physical domains of happiness. They make a difference, but they don't make all the difference. We may have, a lot of things in in terms of material well-being. We may have, something that affects our feelings. These are the domains of happiness. They do make a difference, but the values, the virtues of living a good life, that makes the final difference. There is a concept called hedonistic treadmill, which seeking pleasure and avoiding suffering. Most of us do this, and there we find the path of least resistance. And what it really means is, I really want this is a desire. I start off with a desire. I say, I really want this. So I do something to satisfy that desire. Then I get happiness. So I say, I got happiness. Then after some time, that happiness fades and a new desire comes in. And this is a treadmill which keeps on happening in life. So therefore, our education must be, such that we avoid this hedonistic treadmill. Finally, the compassion leads to happiness. Shantitulyam tapo nasti tosham na paramam sukham. Nasti trushna paro vyadhir na cha dharmo dayapara. There is no penance like peace. There is no greater happiness than satisfaction. And there is no greater disease than desire. Nasti trushna paro vyadhir. And cha dharmo dayapara. No greater dharma than mercy or compassion. So, by the right education in a university, what should happen? Might is ornamented by benevolence, aishwaryasya vibhushanam sujanata, heroism by restraint in speech, shauryastha vaksamyamo, jnanasyopashama, wealth by donating suitably, shrutasya vinayo vittasya patre vyayaha, akrodastapasa kshama, prabhavi dharmasya nirvyajata, sarveshamapi sarvakaranamidam shilam param bhushanam. All wealth is by donating suitably, ascetic practice is by controlling anger, powerful Lord by ability to forgive, religious practice is by honesty, and by only good conduct is the best ornament any person can have. Now, all these virtues must happen in our education system. So what is the ultimate goal? Sukham tvidani trividham shunume bharatashrabha abhyasastramate yatra dukkhanta na cha nigachati. Now, there are three types of happiness: sattvic, rajasvic, and tamasic, of which the most cherished is sattvic and purity or goodness. So follow sattvic way of life for eternal happiness. Now, finally, a good education must lead to bliss. And if we manage even half of what we have learned today, we'll be happy and contented. Sukhiya sab sansar hai, khaye aur soye. Dukhiya das kabir hai, jage aur roye. So Sant Kabir, in a paradoxical moment, says, Sukhiya sab sansar hai, khaye aur soye. Dukhiya das kabir hai, jage aur roye. Now, that in succinct tells us what our education should do to us. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kashchit sabhaga bhavet. All should and must be happy, be healthy, see good, and may no one share sorrow. In these times of stress and surfeit of, your online education tools, there's so much we talk about blended learning, hybrid learning, online tools. The ultimate is a guru. Only a classroom teaching where there is a student-teacher, combination available, Guru Shishya Parampara, as we talk in the ancient days. That is the best way of learning, in spite of all the online tools that we may have. So hence, university education is important, a guru is important, and a student is equally important. Therefore, here, Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim, Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrusham Tattvamasya Lakshyam, attain bliss of Brahman, so be pure and an embodiment of wisdom, be beyond the duality of the world and high in spirituality. So this is what a guru teaches, and through a teacher, we must learn to assimilate the virtues of life. We must build values in life, and therefore the university system must help us to do all this. And whatever I have spoken today is the essence of the value system that is so succinctly described in the national education policy. So therefore, I end here. Work out your own salvation. Do not depend on others. That is Atmanirbharta. I have some references here which I have used. And this is the end of my, presentation. So if anyone has questions, you can ask. I have come to an end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mantha sir. What a fantastic elaboration on value system and virtues of education system. Your talk about how to achieve a steady and stable mind, I am sure, enlightened everyone and will help them to exist with wisdom. Our world lies between the dystopian and utopian, that is somewhere between the two extremes. Sir, as rightly said by you, we all should be proactive and not reactive to be effective in life. Thank you for sharing some very important teachings of Adi Shankaracharya ji, who was the preacher of Advait or Adyaitavad. Going back to the roots and getting into value system will build real character and enhance the real meaning of education. You also demonstrated what you preached, sir. Humility is the best virtue. Be humble and helpful and compassionate to people and become a philanthropist. Sir, I feel learning is a mutual process and fantastically said by you. We should encourage students to ask questions. And in case we don't know the answer, we should have the courage to accept and thrive to update ourselves in future. And yes, in between all of this, mindfulness is very important. Sir, I would like to say your expertise in Sanskrit, the mother of all languages, is phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir, as our chief guest. We are very honored to have you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you, sir.